Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to be able to present this piece of work, which I think really nicely follows the fantastic discussion we had earlier. I was just itching to get up and ask a few questions of the learned panel and hopefully make a few proposals in terms of how I think things could actually change. I hope to now do that through the course of this presentation, which hopefully actually quantifies some of the issues around economic competitiveness, investment and exploration. So the subtext of this particular presentation is attracting the exploration dollar and recommendations from a model junior diamond mining scenario. So what we've done in this particular presentation is we've taken a small primary deposit or a kimberlite, the kind of deposit a junior company would find, which is marginally positive. We put it in the different economic regimes of Southern Africa and we report back shareholder returns. It could be a little bit subjective, but I've had this kind of independently verified just in case some learned CAs in the audience want to have a go at it, and then I conclude with some recommendations. I run a public company, so I have to have that. So on the opening slide here, I do start with a bit of a discussion for those who are not familiar with the diamond world around prospectivity and production. I talk about geopolitical risks because that is self-evident, very important to us. I then go into the study, but I only deal with it briefly because this presentation is only a dozen slides in 15 minutes. There is some discussion and then I make some suggestions. I'm not bold enough to make recommendations, but rather suggestions. The diamond on the right, ladies and gentlemen, is a Lesedi Larona, the second largest diamond found in the world, found at the Karowe mine, which was originally developed by my previous company, African Diamonds PLC, and in conjunction with De Beers. At an earlier presentation I made at the South African Institute of Mining and Metallurgy, I posed the question, and this might seem quite controversial to a Botswana audience, that if AK6, which was the original kimberlite name for Karowe, was found today, would it be mined today? And the answer was no, it wouldn't. Now, for some of you who are familiar with the mine, it produced dividends in its second year of operation. It produced shareholder returns of 25 times to the original shareholders. A gentleman remarked about having to put his life savings into it. We didn't take salaries or pay any expenses for 6 months when we developed it. We think the climate is even worse today. But look what a jewel Botswana would have lost if Karowe was not found today. So just bear that in mind. The history repeats itself, and for those who are interested, I did write a paper published by the University of Botswana last year on the public history of Karowe from 1969 through to the present day, but of course there is a lot unwritten which I'm not willing to publish. So, diamond prospectivity and production. Africa is the most prospective diamond continent in the world, goes without saying. If you look at the annual production by country, the bar chart on the bottom left, you'll see consistently Africa produces 50% or thereabouts of the world's diamonds. If you look at the map of Africa on the right-hand side and cast your eye to the peckled pink and the pink itself, these are cratons. And cratons are basically ancient crust where you will find diamonds. You'll see a massive craton there in southern Africa, which focuses on the northern part of South Africa, the eastern part of Botswana, and the whole of Zimbabwe. And in fact, my company, Botswana Diamonds, is active in all three regions because we believe it to be highly prospective. So it goes without saying that Africa is the place to be for diamonds, and it goes without a shadow of a doubt. There's always a flip side. The flip side is here, and I take from the Fraser Institute report card, which looks at attractiveness from a geopolitical perspective. Africa, sadly, is the second least attractive region for mining investment, because if you look at the italics at the bottom, it's considered a hostile investment environment and it discourages investors. I'm an unashamed Afro-optimist, and I'll go on to make some suggestions towards the end about how I think we could write this, and write it fairly shortly. However, there's always a positive side to this. Botswana, as we all know, and Alan mentioned it this morning, is considered the Switzerland of Africa, and for very good reason to it. and it's remained the highest ranked in Africa on policy factors alone. Very pleasingly, and I'm sure this will continue to grow, both from a South African and Zimbabwean perspective, is the rankings have improved, though there are many unresolved challenges. If you look at the recent elections in Zimbabwe and the positive sentiment from the Deputy Minister yesterday, I see definite positive movement there. If you look at South Africa, the new mining charter is a step ahead of last year's, but again, work in progress, much to be done. If you look at perceptions of risk from a company perspective, which basically bears in mind that of prospectivity and also the geopolitical risk, and this was taken from a PwC chart, and on this I've overprinted both those of a major and that of a junior, or miners and explorers, because they are fundamentally different. I'd like you to particularly look at the blue 5 circle, and that refers to liquidity and funding. Larger companies often have larger balance sheets and can ride out waves in paucity of funding. Junior companies can't actually do that. So it's a high impact and a high likelihood event, and it's not surprising, this is the cornerstone of my presentation. So putting this all together into one particular slide. This slide is a tiny bit complicated on first glance. The size of the bubble is relative to diamond production. On the left-hand side, we've got diamond prospectivity ranking. The hot colours red is a low ranking. The green is a highly prospective ranking. And then going from left to right, mining investment attractiveness, chiefly taken from the Fraser Institute and elsewhere. What I'd like to show you and illustrate more are the movements there over the past 3 years. South Africa has gained in terms of mining investment attractiveness, particularly under the latest legislation. Zimbabwe has gained considerably too as well. DRC and Botswana have come down a little bit, but Botswana's always been at the very top, so that's probably a marginal shift. But you'll see that those 4 bubbles, being the DRC, Botswana, South Africa and Angola, remain highly attractive from a mining investment perspective and also a prospectivity perspective, and Zimbabwe is fast catching up with them. So, getting into the study and trying to quantify some of this stuff from a diamond perspective. As I mentioned in the introduction, we took a small primary deposit, a small kimberlite, something which Botswana Diamonds or any other junior explorer in southern Africa might find, a resource of just over 3.5 million tonnes, a grade of 25 carats per 100 tonnes, a revenue of $150 per carat, and a life of mine of 6 years. Something which could give Botswana Diamond shareholders a possibly 10 times return on their money. We then put this into 5 different mining regimes. South Africa, we've differentiated Botswana in terms of 2. One we call the Kalahari, which is remote and quite complex to operate, and other, which would be chiefly the Jwaneng and the Rapa parts of the world, Zimbabwe, Swaziland and Lesotho. We apply different cost factors from a capital and operating cost perspective, and very importantly, different discount rates with a fairly similar weighted average cost of capital, but different discount rates reflecting the different risk profiles of those areas. So the results of this are actually quite surprising in a way. And I don't need to jump into the detail. I have appendices which are available on request. But interestingly, South Africa presents the highest attraction in absolute return details. And some of you might find that actually quite counterintuitive because of the complexity of the legislation itself. But underscoring the complexity of the legislation is a fairly attractive fiscal regime for junior diamond development. The key issue here is around royalties. If you have a margin of 20% or thereabouts of your diamond project, and you have a royalty of 10% off the top, that's half your margin gone already. Disappeared out the door. So it doesn't matter what you do to it, you're not going to make it work. If you look at the top bullet on the top right-hand corner, South Africa ranks higher because Botswana, Zimbabwe, I don't cover Namibia in here, but Namibia has the same, has a 10% royalty, irrespective of the size of the project itself. Interestingly, the Botswana Kalahari model does not work. So a marginal deposit found in the Kalahari won't work because obviously the cost profile is actually a lot higher, and with the state 10% royalty, it just won't work. So that's actually quite surprising. So stepping back a little bit, and before I kind of conclude with the suggestions, I think this is a very important slide about what each of the different stakeholders seek. And it follows very much from the Honourable Ministers and His Excellency about partnerships in industry. And at the centre of this Venn diagram is a commercial return. If the investor doesn't get a commercial return, he won't invest. Explorers will not look for projects where they don't get a commercial return, and governments need a commercial return to get job creation and taxes. But there you also see, and this is obviously a little bit debatable, this slide, what each stakeholder looks at from an individual perspective. But right at the centre of it is if your project does not make a commercial return, it won't work. The positive side of Southern Africa, what makes it competitive? I mentioned at the very beginning that we're a highly prospective diamond region. We've got a sustained commercial production track record, irrespective of the political dynamics over the past few decades. We've got generally growing economies, and I did draft this presentation before South Africa went into a technical recession, which I believe is a short-term event. We have mostly advanced banking systems. South Africa probably has one of the most advanced banking systems in the world. An evolved regulatory environment with strong judiciaries, and that's always been the case across Southern Africa. Profitable miners, enthusiastic, an example of a capital-constrained explorer, but the question was asked by the earlier panel, where are the local investors? And I hope to answer that question momentarily. Value creation, and I think this is an important kind of aside from this particular presentation, in that it's relatively simple to raise money once you have an indicated resource and once you have a bankable feasibility study. I say relatively simple. It's relatively simple to raise money for very, very early stage work where you get speculative investment, and that's at the bottom left-hand corner of the slide. But the biggest gap, and I'm sure all those who run junior companies would concur with it, is once you've found something, to develop it into a resource itself. Because that's where you have the beginnings of large expenditure coming through, but with still high risk and possibly no hope of commercial return. So what junior explorers are often forced to do is possibly commercialize something before they even have a resource in the ground, because the funding is not available. So, some questions, and we can talk about this over tea and lunch and elsewhere. Why is it that exploration in Southern Africa is funded offshore? I want to dwell on this question momentarily. At the July Botswana Resources Sector Conference, we were told that Botswana has between 40 and 50 years of diamonds left in the ground. The largest explorers in Botswana are my company, Botswana Diamonds, Sodila Resources, and Pangolin Diamonds. 2 Canadian-listed companies, 1 London-listed companies, all juniors, all desperately looking for funding to develop their project. To take an extreme point of view, the future of diamonds in Botswana is in the hands of 3 poorly funded juniors. Is that something that is difficult to contemplate or important to contemplate? I think it is. I think it's vital. If you look at South Africa, it's starting to be called a sunset industry. The mines are getting older and deeper and more expensive. It remains highly prospective. But what incentives are now in place to actually assist and drive exploration? Almost embarrassingly, Botswana Diamonds is the largest diamond explorer in South Africa, and we do pitifully little work which is underfunded. The question earlier was asked, why the high net worth investors in South Africa and Botswana are not investing? And according to our calculations, there are almost 50,000 of them in Botswana and South Africa. So there are a lot, actually, of them. Why are there no junior explorers listed on the JSE and Altex? A good question. Why is Botswana Diamonds only listed junior on the Botswana Stock Exchange, but we can't access capital through the investment? All those institutions which make their money from diamonds, i.e. Botswana, won't invest in diamond exploration. They consider it too high risk. And then two almost parochial things, but very importantly, I'm not sure if you're aware of Section 12J in South Africa. It was mooted as a Canadian flow-through share scheme a number of years ago when it came in, which means that if you invested through 12J, you'll get a maximum marginal tax break of up to 45% on your investment. I thought it was stunning. Not one single diamond or junior explorer has accessed it because of the complexity of the regulations and the lack of a risk appetite of investing in South Africa. Similarly, for the Minerals Development Board of Botswana, will they actually have a mandate to actually stimulate junior exploration in South Africa? And that was a great discussion we had in July on this, and I hope and pray that in the fullness of time they will actually get that mandate, because nothing speaks louder than when I go and raise money in London, the first question they ask is, did you put money in? And of course the answer is yes. The second question is, do you have any local investors? Sadly, that answer is no. But if you have even a small local investor, particularly if it comes from a sovereign wealth fund, it makes it so much easier to raise money at the end of the day. So how can we improve this overall attractiveness? It's not just up to government to do things, there's many things that exploration companies and others must do. From a government perspective, a simple entrepreneur-friendly regulatory environment. I think that the Honourable Minister of Botswana said it very well yesterday, where he spoke about simplicity. Doesn't mean it's simple, it just means it's something which entrepreneurs can grasp. Business incubators for junior miners. I gave a presentation on this a little while ago, and I can actually only think of 3 business incubators for junior miners. The 162 group of companies which I belong to, the Hunter Dickinson group out of Vancouver, and then of course the Lundin group who bought out African Diamonds to form Karowe. Incentivisation critical, and then a very rigorous licensing process. And I'll talk a little bit more when I conclude in my final slide in a moment. From an exploration company perspective, risk mitigation through a portfolio approach. Try not just to have one project. Try to have a few which span the exploration pipeline. Partner with individuals with a solid track record. The previous panel spoke about management expertise and experience. Absolutely critical in this particular game. If you're going to explore, you can't continue doing what previous people have done because you'll get the same results. You've got to deploy new technology, you've got to take risks, you've got to partner with areas of thinking like Professor Haywood at the University of the Witwatersrand and others to see how you can actually reinvent or re-explore areas. And then of course, critical, regulatory compliance and prompt submission of exploration data to make sure you're completely compliant with the law. So my final slide, ladies and gentlemen, and this is not answers to the questions. These are just my kind of simple thoughts and ideas about what we collectively can do to improve this. I think 12J in South Africa can be simplified, and it can easily become the Canadian equivalent of their flow-through share scheme, which revolutionised junior mining in Canada and Canadian junior companies worldwide. It's just got to be simplified again, and there's got to be some education, and the CEO of the BSc mentioned this, around investing in risk-based exploration assets. A different regulatory regime for exploration and mining. In Botswana, for an example, it's all well and good to put a regime around Botswana, which is a highly profitable and highly successful mining company. But I would argue that regime does not apply to junior diamond concerns where projects and assets are very marginal. Thankfully, last week in South Africa, it was announced the black economic empowerment requirements, for example, on prospecting and exploration companies, was waived. And I thought that was a major breakthrough because capital going in under exploration is obviously high risk, and I applaud that. And equally, I applaud maintaining it when it becomes mining, because there you have to go into partnership with stakeholders, the government, and everybody, because large capital is at stake. Less complex laws and regulations. You heard my comment yesterday that a large overseas fund manager only got to page 4 of the mining charter of South Africa and gave up. It was just too complicated. I know in Botswana the regulations are much shorter and much simpler, and I applaud you for that. A sound government database of historical exploration results. Again, Botswana is a great example of that, and a paragon across Southern Africa. In South Africa, you haven't got that. There is no reporting of exploration through to the government. They're now trying to unpack that through spending billions of rands through the Council for Geoscience. But I think it's going to take a long time for them to catch up. And finally, more thorough vetting of financial and technical competence. So those people who are awarded license have both the financial and technical competence to do the work, and it's not just granted to people to flip it and trying to sell something from an exploration perspective. So thank you very much indeed for your time, ladies and gentlemen. I know we're kind of barking on tea break time, but I hope I've given you some kind of thoughts and been a little bit provocative about how we can attract the investment dollar to Southern Africa. Thank you.